My daughter called me at 4:20 on a Sunday afternoon, and she was standing on the front porch of her own home, locked out, with my 2 grandchildren crying beside her in the cold. "Dad," she said, and her voice was shaking so hard I could barely understand her. "Dad, my key doesn't work. He changed the locks. There's a woman's car in the driveway, and he won't open the door." My son-in-law, Trent, had waited until my daughter took the kids to visit me for the weekend, and in those 2 days he had changed every lock on the house, and he had moved his mistress in, and he had decided that my Sarah and my grandbabies could simply go find somewhere else to live. He told her through the door without even opening it that it was over, that she should go stay with her father, that the house was his now. And he was so confident, so smug, so certain that a discarded wife and her old man had no power to do anything about it. But Trent Marlowe had made one terrible mistake. In all his years of taking everything I gave him, he had never once bothered to learn who my daughter's father really was. He thought I was just a quiet old man in a work truck. He was about to find out that the house he'd locked her out of was never his, and neither was anything else he thought he owned. Before we go any further, I want to thank you for being here with me tonight. If this story already has hold of your heart the way it had hold of mine, do me a small kindness and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It genuinely helps these stories reach the people who need them. And a gentle word before we begin. Some names, places, and details in this account have been changed and dramatized for storytelling and educational purposes, and any resemblance to real people is coincidental. But the truth underneath it, the warning folded into the middle, is as real as the ground I've spent my whole life building on. My name is Edward Brennan. Most everybody just calls me Ed. I'm 69 years old, and for 45 of those years, I built houses. I started with a single truck, a set of second-hand tools, and a back that ached before I was 30, and I built Brennan Construction from nothing into the largest homebuilder in 3 counties. If you drive through the town of Brookhaven where I live, you'll see my work everywhere. The elementary school, the library, whole neighborhoods of homes where families are raising their kids right now, families who have no idea that the quiet old man in the beat-up F-250 they see at the hardware store is the one who put the roof over their heads. Because here's the thing about me that my son-in-law never understood. I don't look like a wealthy man. I don't act like one. I wear the same flannel shirts I've worn for 30 years. I drive a work truck with 200,000 miles on it. I eat breakfast at the same diner every morning, and I know the waitress's grandkids by name. When my wife and I finally had real money, we didn't move into a mansion. We stayed in the house I built us with my own 2 hands. Because I grew up with nothing, and men who grew up with nothing never quite believe the money is real, and we never quite stop being the person we were before it came. To a certain kind of person, a person like Trent, a man like me is invisible, just an old-timer in work boots, a nobody to be humored and managed and eventually stepped over. And that, friends, is the most dangerous mistake a person can make, because the quiet ones, the humble ones, the ones you don't look at twice, are very often the ones holding everything up. My son-in-law learned that lesson far too late. But before I tell you how it ended, I have to tell you about the 2 people at the center of my whole life. My wife, Kathleen, and my daughter, Sarah. Because you cannot understand what I did unless you understand who I was protecting, and unless you understand the quiet, brilliant foresight of a woman who saw the whole thing coming years before it did. Kathleen and I were married for 41 years. She passed 4 years ago of a cancer that took her far too fast, and there is not a single day I don't reach for her in some small way. Kathleen was the wise one in our marriage. I could look at a plot of raw dirt and see the house that would stand on it in a year. But Kathleen could look at a person and see, clear as day, the truth of who they were underneath whatever face they were showing the world. She was almost never wrong about people, and the one time it mattered most, she was exactly right, and I very nearly didn't listen. Sarah is our only child. Our daughter came late, after years of hoping, and she was the joy of both our lives. Smart, warm, a little too trusting, which she got from me. She grew up watching her old man build things, and she grew up believing, the way children of good fathers do, that most people are as decent as her dad. That belief is a beautiful thing. It is also, in a hard world, a dangerous one, because trusting people don't see the wolves until the wolves are already inside the house. Sarah met Trent Marlowe about 9 years ago. And I'll be honest with you because I promised you the truth. Trent charmed me. He charmed all of us. He was handsome, sharp, ambitious, with a firm handshake and an easy way of making you feel like the most important man in the room. He was working in sales for a supply company back then, doing well enough, and he pursued my Sarah with a focus that I mistook for love. He said all the right things. He deferred to me. He asked me about the business, listened to my stories, laughed at my jokes. I thought, here is a young man with drive who adores my daughter, What more could a father want? Kathleen wasn't so sure. She never came right out and said she disliked him, but she'd get quiet around him. And once, after a dinner where Trent had been especially charming, she said to me as we washed the dishes, "Ed, that boy watches you the way a man watches a safe he's trying to figure out how to open." I laughed it off. I told her she was being unfair. She just dried a plate and said nothing, which was Kathleen's way of telling you she'd said her piece and time would prove her right. They married 8 years ago at a big beautiful wedding I was proud to pay for. And because I loved my daughter, and because I believed in this young man who seemed to love her back, I did what any father in my position would want to do. I set them up. I gave them a start most young couples could only dream of. First, the house. As a wedding gift, I built them a home, not just any home. The finest house I ever built, at 42 Larkspur Lane in the best neighborhood in Brookhaven. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a kitchen Kathleen designed herself. $650,000 of house, and I handed them the keys free and clear. But here is where Kathleen's wisdom saved us all, and I didn't even understand it at the time. When we were doing the paperwork on the house, Kathleen took me aside and she was very serious. She said, "Ed, I want that house in Sarah's name alone, not joint with Trent." I was surprised. I said, "Kath, they're married, it'll be marital property anyway, why does it matter?" And she looked at me with those clear eyes and she said, "Because you never truly know a person until the day things go wrong. And if that day ever comes for our girl, I want her standing on ground that belongs to her and no one else. Promise me, Ed, title it to Sarah." I thought she was being overcautious. I thought it was a little insulting to Trent, honestly, but I never could refuse Kathleen anything, so I did as she asked. I put 42 Larkspur Lane in our daughter's name alone, and I forgot all about it. For 8 years, I forgot all about it. Trent certainly never knew. He lived in that house for 8 years believing it was his, and it was never, not for one single day, anything but my daughter's. The second thing I gave Trent was a job, and this one I'd come to regret in a way the house I never could. Because Trent, sharp and ambitious as he was, wanted more than sales, so I brought him into Brennan Construction. I started him in project management, and he was good at it, I'll give him that. He worked hard, he was smart, and over the years I promoted him, all the way up to Vice President of Operations. I handed my son-in-law a 6-figure salary, an executive title, and a place in the company I'd bled 45 years to build. I told myself I was building a legacy, a family business. Something to pass down to Sarah and the grandchildren someday with Trent at the helm. I gave that man everything, the house he slept in, the job that paid for his life, the name and the reputation that opened every door in town for him. And he took it all and he smiled, and the whole time, if my Kathleen was right, and she was always right, he was watching the safe, figuring out how to open it. Now stay with me here, because we're getting to the years when the mask started to slip. But first, do me a favor. If you've ever given someone everything you had out of love and watched them take it without a shred of gratitude, type the word grateful in the comments below, because those people never were, and I want to know how many of us have loved one. And a gentle reminder, this story weaves together dramatized and fictional elements for the purpose of storytelling and reflection. If that's not your cup of tea, I understand completely, and you're welcome to step away. But if you want to see what happens when a wolf finally forgets which house he's living in, stay right where you are. The grandchildren came, and they were the light that Kathleen's passing had dimmed. Ellie is 8 now, all questions and wonder, and Noah is 5, my little shadow, who wants to be a builder like his grandpa and carries a plastic hammer everywhere he goes. Those 2 children are my whole heart. And for the first few years, life was good. Sarah was a wonderful mother. Trent seemed like a decent enough father, distracted maybe, working a lot, but providing. I had my daughter and my grandbabies 20 minutes away, in a house I'd built with love, and after losing Kathleen, that nearness was the thing that kept me going. But somewhere in the last 2 or 3 years, Trent began to change, or maybe he didn't change at all. Maybe he just stopped bothering to hide. Kathleen was gone, and Kathleen was the one who'd always watched him closely, and I think with her gone, he felt free to let the mask drop. The arrogance came first, little things. He started talking to me differently at the company, correcting me in meetings, rolling his eyes at the old way of doing things. He started spending money in ways I couldn't square with even his generous salary. New cars, expensive watches, trips. I figured he'd gotten into some investments or gone into debt, and I didn't pry because it wasn't my place and because I didn't want to be the meddling father-in-law. And Sarah got quieter. My warm, funny daughter got smaller somehow, more careful, the way a person gets when they're walking on eggshells they won't admit are there. When I'd ask if everything was all right, she'd smile and say, "Everything's fine, Dad," in a voice that had the life pressed out of it. I heard that voice and something in my gut turned over, but I told myself I was an old man seeing shadows. I told myself to let my daughter live her life. God, how I wish I'd asked harder. How I wish I'd listened to my gut the way Kathleen always listened to hers. There were signs I see clearly now, in the terrible clarity of hindsight. Trent working late constantly, then not answering his phone. A perfume that wasn't Sarah's. A coldness where there used to be, if not warmth, at least civility. My daughter was living inside the slow-motion collapse of her marriage, and she was doing what trusting people do. She was making excuses, blaming herself, holding on, hoping it would pass. She never said a word to me. She didn't want to worry me. She didn't want to admit that the fairy tale her father had built her, the beautiful house on Larkspur Lane, was rotting from the inside. And then came that Sunday, that cold Sunday in the second week of November. Sarah had brought the kids to my place for the weekend. Trent had said he needed the house to himself to catch up on work, and Sarah, glad for any excuse to see her father, had packed up Ellie and Noah and come to stay with me. We'd had a wonderful 2 days. I taught Noah to use a real screwdriver. Ellie and I baked her grandmother's cookies from Kathleen's old recipe card. For 2 days, my house was full of the sound of children again, and I was happier than I'd been in a long, long time. On Sunday afternoon, Sarah packed the kids back into the car to head home, and 40 minutes later, my phone rang, and it was my daughter standing on the porch of her own home, locked out in the cold with her babies crying beside her. "Dad, my key doesn't work. He changed the locks. There's a woman's car in the driveway, and he won't open the door." I want to tell you exactly what happened on that porch, because Sarah told me every detail later through her tears, and I have not been able to forget a single one of them. She'd pulled into the driveway and seen a car she didn't recognize, a red convertible parked in her spot like it belonged there. She'd tried her key and it didn't turn. She'd tried the back door, same. She'd knocked, confused, thinking maybe something was wrong with the locks, and Trent had come to the door, but he hadn't opened it. He'd spoken to his wife of 8 years through the closed door, with a strange woman standing in the kitchen behind him, and he'd said, and I quote my daughter exactly, "Sarah, this isn't working anymore. Brooke lives here now, go stay with your dad. I'll have my lawyer send you the paperwork. Don't make a scene in front of the neighbors." Brooke lives here now. My daughter stood on the front porch of the home her father built for her, holding her 5-year-old's hand with her 8-year-old asking, "Mommy, why can't we go inside?" And her husband told her, through a door he wouldn't even open, that another woman lived there now, and that she should go away quietly. And then she called me. I have built a lot of things in my life, and I've been steady through a lot of hard days. But I will tell you that when I heard my grandbabies crying in the background and my daughter's voice breaking on the words, "He won't open the door," something happened in me that I hadn't felt in years. It was not hot, it was cold, ice cold and crystal clear, the way the best decisions of my life have always come to me. And in that cold clarity, one thought rose above all the others, calm and certain. That house is in Sarah's name. Kathleen, you brilliant woman. That house has been in Sarah's name for 8 years, and Trent Marlowe just locked my daughter out of a home that legally belongs to her and moved his mistress into a house he has no right to. "Sarah," I said, and I kept my voice as calm and steady as I could, because she needed her father to be a rock right then, not a storm. "Listen to me, sweetheart. I want you to put the kids back in the car, and I want you to drive to my house. Don't argue with him, don't knock again, don't give the neighbors a show. You just come home to your dad. Can you do that for me?" "Dad," he said, "the house is his," he said. "Sarah," I said it gently but firmly. "I need you to trust me on this, even though it doesn't make sense yet. That house is not his. It never was. Come home and bring the kids. Everything is going to be all right. I promise you, on your mother's memory, everything is going to be all right." She came home, and that night, after I'd gotten Ellie and Noah fed and bathed and tucked into the guest room with the good quilts, after I'd held my grown daughter while she cried the way she hadn't cried since she was a little girl, after the house finally went quiet, I sat alone in my kitchen, and I did not sleep. I sat there until dawn, and I made a plan, not a hot-headed plan, not a reckless one, a builder's plan, careful, measured, built to last and built to hold, because Trent Marlowe thought he'd won. He thought he'd discarded my daughter and gotten away with it. And I was going to show him, brick by careful brick, exactly how wrong he was. The first call I made at 8:00 the next morning was to Harold Beck. Harold has been my attorney and my friend for 35 years. He drew up the papers on half the houses I ever built, including a certain house on Larkspur Lane 8 years ago. When I told him what had happened, Harold was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Ed, please tell me the house is still in Sarah's name." "Sarah's name alone," I said, just like Kathleen wanted. I heard my old friend exhale. "Then Trent Marlowe has made a catastrophic mistake," he said. "Ed, that man has no legal right to that house. None. He's not on the title, he can't sell it, he can't keep her out of it, and moving another person in while excluding the legal owner, your daughter, that's not just wrong, it's actionable. He's living in your daughter's house without any legal claim to it. We can have the locks changed back and your daughter restored to her home, lawfully, with the police present if need be, within days. He paused. But Ed, I have to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully. This is going to get ugly. A divorce, a custody fight maybe. Are you ready for a war? And I looked out my kitchen window at the sun coming up over the town I'd spent my life building, and I thought about my grandbabies asleep down the hall, locked out of their own bedrooms the night before, and I said, Harold, I've been building things my whole life. I know how to lay a foundation nobody can crack. Let's build one for Sarah. Let's do it right and let's do it airtight so that when it's over, my daughter and her children are standing on solid ground and Trent Marlowe is standing on nothing. I paused, and Harold, I have a feeling that if we start looking closely at Trent, the house is only going to be the beginning. I don't know what made me say that last part. Call it 45 years of watching how men who spend more than they earn always, eventually, have a reason. Call it Kathleen's voice in my ear, warning me about the man watching the safe. But my gut told me that a man capable of what Trent had done to my daughter was a man capable of a great deal more, and my gut, like Kathleen's, has rarely been wrong. 2 days later, a woman named Denise Park came to see me. Denise has been the bookkeeper at Brennan Construction for 11 years, quiet, meticulous, honest as the day is long, and she came into my office and closed the door, and she was clearly nervous, wringing her hands, and she said, Mr. Brennan, I've wanted to come to you for months, but I was scared. And now with everything happening with Sarah, I can't keep it to myself anymore. And she set a folder on my desk and her hands were shaking. Mr. Brennan, I think Trent has been stealing from the company, and I think he's been doing it for a long time. Now, before I tell you what was in that folder, I need to know you're still here with me. This is the part where the ground opened up under my whole understanding of the man I'd handed my company to. If you believe that the people who do the quiet, honest work, the bookkeepers and the assistants and the ones nobody notices, are often the ones brave enough to finally tell the truth, type the word honest in the comments. I want to see them, and one last note, as always, this account contains dramatized and fictional elements for the purpose of storytelling and reflection. If that isn't for you, no hard feelings. But if you want to know exactly how deep Trent Marlowe's betrayal went, stay with me. What Denise had found, and what a forensic accountant named Nina Alvarez confirmed over the following 2 weeks of careful, quiet digging, took the cold thing in my chest and turned it to steel. Trent had been stealing from Brennan Construction for nearly 4 years. He'd done it the way clever men do it, through vendors. He'd set up a handful of shell companies, fake suppliers with real-sounding names, and he'd been approving payments to them for materials and services that never existed. As vice president of operations, he had the authority to sign off on those invoices, and he'd been signing off on his own fake ones, funneling the money into accounts he controlled. Nina traced it all. $412,000 stolen over 4 years from the company I'd built with my own hands. From me, from his own wife's father, from the man who'd given him everything, and that wasn't even the worst of it. Because Nina followed the money and the money led somewhere. It led to the lifestyle I'd wondered about. The new cars, the watches, the trips, and it led, most damningly of all, to a woman named Brooke Dennison, the red convertible in the driveway. Trent's mistress, Nina, found that some of the stolen money had gone directly to Brooke, into her accounts and toward things in her name. And when Nina dug into Brooke, now I had everything, the deed proving the house was Sarah's, Nina's forensic report proving the embezzlement, airtight, documented, undeniable, Denise's testimony, and Brooke Dennison's role tying it all together. Harold Beck coordinated it all, and because embezzlement of that scale is a serious crime, he brought in the proper authorities. It was time. It was time to reclaim my daughter's home, and it was time for Trent Marlowe to finally, at long last, learn who her father was. We did it on a Thursday morning, and we did it right, the lawful way, the way that would hold. Harold had secured a court order restoring Sarah to her lawful property and removing the unauthorized occupants, a locksmith. 2 police officers present to keep the peace and enforce the order. And me, I insisted on being there. I'd earned that. We arrived at 42 Larkspur Lane at 9:00 in the morning. Trent's car was there. Brooke's red convertible was there in my daughter's spot. And I walked up the wraparound porch I'd built with my own hands, the porch my daughter had been locked out of, and I knocked on the door, the way Trent hadn't done for her. He opened it this time because there were police officers standing behind me, and even Trent Marlowe wasn't foolish enough to ignore that. And when he saw me standing there, the confusion on his face was almost comical. Ed. He said, "What is this? What are the police doing here?" Trent, I said, calm and pleasant, the way you talk to a man when you're holding everything and he's holding nothing. I think it's time you and I had a proper conversation. May I come in? Oh, wait. I looked around at the porch at the house. I don't actually need to ask, do I? This is my daughter's house. It's been in Sarah's name alone since the day I gave it to you both. You've been living in my daughter's home for 8 years, son. Did you never wonder whose name was on the deed? I watched it land. I watched the color drain out of his face as the first crack appeared in his certainty. That's not, we're married, it's marital. It's titled to Sarah alone, Harold Beck said, stepping forward with the paperwork. It is her separate property. You have no legal claim to it whatsoever. And this court order restores her to her home and requires you and Ms. Dennison to vacate the premises today. Brooke appeared behind Trent then, and she went pale when she saw the officers. And Trent, cornered, did what men like him always do. He got angry. You can't do this. You can't just throw me out of my own. It was never your house, Trent, I said, but that's the least of your problems now. Because while my lawyer was confirming the deed, my forensic accountant was going through the books at Brennan Construction. I watched him go very still. $412,000, Trent, over 4 years, fake vendors. Shell companies, invoices you signed yourself. I let it sink in. I know about all of it. I know about the accounts. I know where the money went. And I know about Brooke's part in setting it up back when she coordinated vendors at Coastal Supply. Brooke made a small sound behind him. You didn't just steal my daughter's marriage, son. You stole from the man who gave you everything. You robbed me blind for 4 years, and then you tried to throw my daughter and my grandbabies out into the cold. And the whole time, you never once bothered to find out that the old man in the work truck built the company you were stealing from, and owns the house you're standing in, and has spent 45 years learning how to make a foundation that no crooked man can crack. Trent Marlowe stood in the doorway of my daughter's house, and I watched everything he thought he'd built collapse in real time. The house gone, the company gone, the secret life exposed. And behind it all, the slow, dawning horror of a man realizing he had spent 9 years underestimating the one person he should have feared. You should have asked Trent, I said quietly. You should have asked who her father was. But men like you never do. You're too busy watching the safe to ever really look at the man standing in front of it. Let me tell you how it all settled, because I know you want to know. Trent Marlowe was charged with embezzlement. The evidence Nina assembled was so complete that his lawyer barely put up a fight. He took a plea in the end, the way these men do when the wall is too high to climb. He was sentenced to 4 years and ordered to pay full restitution of the $412,000, which he'll be paying back for the rest of his working life. Brooke Dennison, for her role in setting up the scheme, faced her own charges and her own reckoning. The secret life they'd built with my money dissolved the moment the truth touched it, exactly like the illusion it always was. The divorce was not a war after all. It couldn't be. Because a man who has stolen $400,000 and been publicly exposed as an embezzler and an adulterer has no leverage left to fight with. Harold made sure Sarah kept everything that was rightfully hers, which was, as it turned out, nearly everything. The house on Larkspur Lane was already hers. Trent walked away with what he'd started with, which was nothing, plus a criminal record and a restitution bill, and the knowledge that he'd thrown away a good woman and 2 beautiful children for a life that was built on sand. Sarah got full custody of Ellie and Noah. Trent sees them under supervision when the court allows it, which is rarely, and honestly I don't think his heart is in it. A man like that doesn't love the way real fathers love. He never did. But here's the part that matters. Here's the part I'll carry with me until I'm back with Kathleen. My daughter came home. We changed the locks that Thursday afternoon, back to keys that fit Sarah's hand, and I walked my girl and my grandbabies back through the front door of the home I'd built for them. Ellie ran straight up to her bedroom and hugged her stuffed animals. Noah asked me if the bad car was gone, and I told him it was, and it was never coming back. And Sarah stood in the kitchen her mother designed, and she looked around at the house that had almost been taken from her, and she started to cry. But this time they weren't the tears from the porch. They were different. Mom knew, didn't she? She said. Mom made you put it in my name. She protected me before I even knew I needed protecting. What? Your mother, I said, and my own voice cracked, was the wisest person I ever knew. And she loved you more than her own life. She saw the whole thing coming 8 years before it did. And she made sure that when the ground fell out from under you, you'd be standing on solid rock. I put my arm around my daughter. You've always been standing on solid ground, sweetheart. You just couldn't see it until now. What? It's been a little over a year, and Sarah has come back to life in a way that fills my old heart to bursting. She went back to school, part-time, studying interior design, because it turns out my girl inherited her mother's eye for what makes a house a home. She's remaking Larkspur Lane, room by room, erasing every trace of the man who tried to steal it, making it truly hers. The kids are thriving. Ellie's on the honor roll. Noah still carries his plastic hammer everywhere, and he tells everyone he's going to build houses with Grandpa someday, and you know what, I believe he will. I'm teaching him already. Every Saturday, the two of us out in my workshop, learning how to measure twice and cut once, learning how to build things that last. Brennan Construction is stronger than ever. I promoted Denise, the honest bookkeeper who found the courage to come to me, and I brought in good, trustworthy people to fill the hole Trent left. The company that was almost hollowed out from the inside by a thief is solid again, and someday when I'm gone, it'll go to Sarah and to those grandchildren, protected this time, built on a foundation no crooked man will ever crack again. I still drive the old truck, I still eat breakfast at the diner, I'm still the quiet old man in the flannel shirt that nobody looks at twice. And I've made my peace with that. In fact, I've come to treasure it. Because being underestimated, I've learned, is its own kind of quiet power. It let me see Trent Marlowe clearly long before he ever thought to look at me. So here's what I want to leave you with tonight, wherever you are, whoever you're listening from. Never ever measure a person by the truck they drive, or the shirt they wear, or the fuss they make. The loudest man in the room is almost never the strongest one. Trent Marlowe spent 9 years so busy performing success, so busy calculating and taking and scheming, that he never once saw the quiet, steady old man who was holding up everything he stood on. He looked right at me for 9 years and saw a nobody, and that blindness cost him everything. The humble ones, the quiet ones, the ones doing honest work in old boots, watch them, respect them, learn from them. They're very often the ones holding the whole thing up, and listen to the people who love you, especially when they're trying to protect you from something you can't yet see. My Kathleen looked at a charming young man and saw the truth of him 8 years before it came out, and because I loved her enough to trust her wisdom even when I didn't understand it, my daughter had solid ground to stand on when everything fell apart. The people who truly love you are not being paranoid or unfair when they gently warn you. They're seeing with the eyes of love, which are often the clearest eyes of all. Don't dismiss them. Someday their foresight might be the only thing standing between someone you love and the cold. And if you're the one tonight who's been locked out, discarded, thrown into the cold by someone who promised to love you, someone who thought you had no power and no one in your corner, I want you to hear this most of all. You're standing on more solid ground than you know. There is someone who loves you, a father, a friend, a God who sees you, who has been protecting you in ways you can't yet see. The people who discard the faithful and the trusting always underestimate the quiet strength that surrounds them. Your worth was never in that person's hands to throw away. It never was. I believe there's a purpose in the hard roads. I believe my Kathleen is somewhere at peace, watching over her daughter and her grandbabies, glad her foresight held. And I believe that in the end, the quiet, faithful, humble love that builds a solid foundation will always outlast the loud, grasping greed that tries to steal it. I've staked my whole life on that belief, 45 years of it, one honest house at a time.